In his book, Dr. Stenger indicts the fine-tuning argument by saying, well, some other form of life might have evolved had the fine-tuning not existed. Perhaps life based on silicon instead of carbon. And what I want to say here is that if we're to avoid talking nonsense here, we need to define what we mean clearly by life. By life, scientists mean that property of organisms to take in food, extract energy from it, adapt, grow, and reproduce. And the point is that in order to permit life, the constants and quantities have to be so finely tuned that it is incomprehensible. Scientists who study this are fully aware of alternative proposed bases for life, and the problem is they don't work. For example, take silicon. Silicon is hopelessly inadequate as a basis for life for a number of reasons. It is no coincidence that there is no living thing made out of silicon. Nothing made out of silicon is alive. Dr. Stenger is reduced to saying in his article on fine-tuning, computer chips are made of silicon, and the network of computer chips known as the World Wide Web seems to have taken on a life of its own. Well, come on now. When biologists talk about life, they don't mean it in this metaphorical sense. They're talking about life in the sense that I defined it. And the point is that that kind of life could not exist based on silicon. Even more importantly, silicon itself wouldn't even exist without the fine-tuning of the universe. Without the fine-tuning of the universe, in many cases, there wouldn't even be chemistry. There wouldn't even be the heavy elements. So that the fine-tuning of the universe, I think, is simply a scientific fact. And the question is, how do you best explain it? Well, neither physical necessity nor chance can explain it, and I think that suggests that design is the best alternative. The other arguments I don't have time to reinforce in this speech, but I'll wait to hear Dr. Stenger's refutation of those in his rebuttal, and then comment perhaps during the dialogue time on what he has to say.
Dr. Stenger now has 12 minutes for his rebuttal.
Really, thank you. Could you put my slides up? Good. Well, I'm going to respond now mainly to Dr. Craig's opening remarks. However, I will try to add some further comments on what he's just said. Now, Carl Sagan has said that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And he probably wasn't the first one to say that. Well, Dr. Craig has made what I regard as the extraordinary claim that certain empirical facts require a supernatural explanation. Now, in order to refute that, all I need to do is provide plausible natural explanations for these phenomena. I need not prove these. If he wants to argue that God is required to exist in order to explain the observed universe, Dr. Craig must disprove all possible natural explanations for these phenomena. Let's start with his cosmological argument. Dr. Craig argues that whatever begins must have a cause. The universe had a beginning, therefore the universe must have had a cause. However, we know from physics that not everything that begins has a cause. Physical bodies begin to exist all the time without cause. Let's consider radioactive decay of an atomic nucleus. The alpha particle or beta particle or gamma particle that are emitted in a radioactive decay, those particles come into being, come into existence without a cause. The beginning of the Big Bang, the universe was like a subatomic particle. So these ideas could apply. Again, I can't prove it, but I don't have to prove it. That here is one example that refutes Dr. Craig's claim that everything begins must have a cause. But even if everything that begins has a cause, it does not apply, this does not necessarily apply to the universe if the universe did not have a beginning. Dr. Craig argues that the Big Bang is evidence that the universe had a beginning. However, the universe need not have begun with the Big Bang. And I'm not talking about this one particular speculation from my book. There are many prominent physicists and cosmologists who published papers in reputable scientific journals proposing various scenarios by which the Big Bang appeared naturally out of a pre-existing universe that need not of itself have had a beginning. One such recent example is the cyclic universe. Now, Dr. Craig also claims that the universe had to begin because if it were infinitely old, it would take an infinite time to reach the present. However, if the universe is infinitely old, then it had no beginning, not a beginning infinitely long ago. Furthermore, the universe can be finite, and I actually believe the universe is finite. It can be finite and still not have a beginning. Einstein defined time as what you read on a clock. It's a number, the number of ticks on the clock. We count forward time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ticks. We never reach infinite time. We can also count time backward and never reach minus infinity. The notion that the universe had either a beginning or will have an end are theological notions, not scientific ones. Now, what about this fine-tuning argument? Again, it's an argument that is based on the low probability of our kind of life. And that means not only carbon-based life, but also life with the existing physical laws as we know them. Now, even if the probability of a particular form of life was highly improbable to have occurred by natural processes, some kind of life could still be highly probable. Probably not silicon life. I agree, silicon is a poor candidate, but that's with our existing laws of physics. Another form of life might still evolve in a universe with different physical laws or different physical constants. We simply don't have the knowledge to rule that out. To say that there's only one possible form of life and only one possible set of laws of physics and only one possible set of constants is extremely narrow thinking and not at all required by anything that we know about science. Now, in this argument and other arguments about the design in the universe, Dr. Craig claims that the universe and life are too improbable to be solely natural. However, this is a fallacious argument. To use probability to decide between two alternatives requires a comparison of the probabilities of each alternative. Dr. Craig claims these natural probabilities are exceedingly low. But he hasn't told us anything about what the supernatural probabilities are, and it's the comparison of these two that must be made. What's the probability that the laws of nature are violated? What's the probability that there's an all-good, all-powerful, all-knowing, but undetectable super being behind all of this? Complex things are common. We see natural events every moment. We've never seen a supernatural event. Furthermore, low probability events happen every day. What's the probability that my distinguished opponent exists? You have to calculate the probability that a particular sperm united with a particular egg, then multiply that by the probability that his parents met, and then repeat that calculation for his grandparents and all of his ancestors going back to the beginning of life on Earth.